My upgrades are Invincible, Chapter 69, Fan Fiction, by Azazyel. Astrea was honestly the most beautiful of the goddesses I have seen so far. Soft brown hair clad in a tight-fitting dress that clung to her voluptuous frame and exposed a good deal of her cleavage, but she wore it well as her soft brown eyes gazed at me in understanding as I spoke of the Hephaestus Familia culling. I see. We ourselves have come to Melon temporarily due to some issues in Ororio, and we have decided to come provide what justice we can to this sinful city. Astrea spoke kindly but firmly. I gave a nod of agreement, and I looked over at Elise, who was standing in beside her goddess with a grin crossing her face as she sent me a happy wave but as I took in their ship's siding to fight monsters. I noticed the side panels were a lot smaller than the ones on my ship. And knowing that the Astrea Familia was one of the most trustworthy goddesses and their Familia members being very much on the order good side of things, I spoke up. Hey, if you girls want, you girls are welcome to hook up to the back of my ship, and you can fight on here with us as we have plenty of room. Astrea, being a virgin goddess, gave me an odd look before I smiled wryly and pointed out to the size of my ship, and I said, I only have these 2 Familia members, so if anything, it would help me if you guys could take up some of the space so the monsters can't get to my ship. Elise, the captain of the Astrea Familia, waved a hand and said, Lady Astrea, he isn't lying, and we could use some extra space as Lyra and Kagaya can't fight properly on our boat. As though summoned by the beautiful redhead's words, the door leading into the small interior section of the boat opened up with 3 more ladies walking out. First was a woman I did recognize as being Gajuno Kagaya with her reddish-pink eyes, long black hair, and oriental features, as she was noted for being the second strongest member of the Astrea Familia. Second was a woman I didn't recognize with a curvy form and long bluish hair that. The last woman was also someone I did recognize in Lyra, who had light pink hair. And was a Palum like my tin, but she had this terrible smug smile she wore as she inspected my form along with Tina's as she killed monsters with her spear. Yo, I want to go play with her, she has some spunk haha, Lyra called out excitedly and she showed off what looked like the abilities of a level 2 like myself as she leaped from her boat's railing down to my ship's widened platform on the water level with a soft thudding noise ringing out from her light frame hitting the platform. Lyra. You ugh. Elise called out with annoyance, and I couldn't help but chuckle at how exasperated she looked. But either way, I shrugged my shoulders and called out to Astrea. Then please excuse me, Lady Astrea, I will also be joining in the melee if you don't have anything else you wish to speak of. To which Astrea gave a small, gentle smile before shaking her head, and then she stepped back towards the ship's hold and simply said, Mariu, you keep an eye on the ship and heal anyone that needs it. I will be going back into the hold to keep out of the way. Seeing her leaving, I jumped down onto the wide semicircle plate alone for but a moment, and then I blinked, seeing the kimono-clad figure of Gajuno Kagaya regally landing atop my platform and bowing her head as she said calmly, I do not suppose I could share this platform with you. And I just chuckled, saying easily, You are welcome to my ship, Kagaya, but I ask that you leave any mermaids and kelpies to me and mine as we are trying to tame them, if that is all right, I spoke up at the end to everyone in earshot. Elise and Lyra gave me an odd look until I waved my hand with my large kelpie, leaving my inventory and making their eyes widen as I patted the large, enhanced sea-based horse. So you have a skill for taming? Kagaya asked curiously, and I think I saw Astrea peeking over the edge of her ship, so I replied honestly. Yeah, though it's more of a spatial skill that keeps stuff and even living things that I can summon at will. Behind you, Kagaya. I said in a rush at the end, and the Far Eastern woman spun around beautifully with her kimono dancing in the motion as she drew her katana and sliced a swordfish that flew towards her in half with its guts spilling out onto the platform. She then gave me a nod of respect in telling her, and that was it as we slowly drifted over the water, and the level 1 and 2 rated monsters that dared to climb up onto our ship were slaughtered as we all quickly found a rhythm that just worked honestly. Lyra would use her throwing knives to support Tina from range and would pick up her knives and such when Tina would call upon her skill to gain more strength. Elise and Tamamo. Luckily, The fucking ship's platforms were made out of metal as both of them were throwing around their fire abilities like our boats weren't the only thing keeping us from having to swim in monster-infested water. But Kagaya and I. We were a bloody dance of gore and efficient murder. See, I knew a good bit of Kagaya's past, as she was frankly one of the most interesting members of the Astrea Familia. She used to be an assassin back in the Far East, which was the home of where the majority of the Shinto gods stayed, and she performed murder like a master pianist played a well-tuned instrument. Her sword work was a painter drawing death upon the world, and, I in turn, complemented her perfectly as the exhaustive list of weapons I had some manner of expertise in and some amount of mastery allowed me to dance between her sweeping blows to murder everything that her slicing blade couldn't properly bisect within a single blow. A diamondback turtle's shell, she couldn't get through. That was easy. I used the hooked side blade of the Abyss Watchers and the Farron greatsword to pry open its shell slightly so she could fillet the inside of the turtle from its side. Dozens of flying fish shooting from the water towards us like high-speed arrows. She danced between me and pressed her form against mine to help me hold Havel's stone-like dragon-scale great shield in front of me, killing all the flying fishes with their own impacts. But minutes later, Kagaya lost her regal appearance in front of me as she chuckled loudly and said, "Huh, I like you, Jake. You are a delight to fight alongside with those weapons you have tucked away." I gave a wry smile as Elise flushed and looked between me and Kagaya scandalized for a moment, before a loud hiss gathered my attention. I raised an eyebrow, seeing two mermen rising up out of the water while mounted on their kelpies, along with a trio of mermaids who remained in the water behind the mermen. Obviously there to heal the mermen would be knights who were armed with tridents made out of what looked like coral. I stood up straight, seeing the upper-level 3 monsters with Kagaya asking bluntly, "You confident in dealing with them?" I smiled and, feeling the perk of guts from doing his sword challenge, giving me a hint of confidence that I didn't really even need, I answered calmly, "Yeah, I can deal with them if I have you to help." And the Kelpie-mounted merman didn't give me and Kagaya any longer to plan as the Kelpie hissed loudly and charged across the water like its hoof steps were running over smooth ground. Gotta dismount the merman with their height, reach, and force advantage due to the Kelpies. I thought before taking a breath, and as they came close, I spoke to Kagaya. "Get ready to go straight for the merman." I heard a grunt of agreement, and as they came closer, I stepped forward and spun to gain momentum, and then I whipped my hands outwards with my large weighted metal net flying outwards and falling onto the face of one of the Kelpies and over its rider. Then, with one of the Kelpies staggered as it got hit in the eyes by the bouncing net that the merman was trying to rip off its form, with the net spikes digging into both the rider and the Kelpie's flesh. I dashed forward with Kagaya to the other one, and with Guts' Dragonslayer sword, I met a powerful thrust from the merman's trident that pushed me back due to the merman and the Kelpie's combined strength pushing me back. But that was perfect as it gave Kagaya time to retaliate as when the merman pulled his trident back to go for another powerful thrust she came from behind me past my side and the merman screamed as her sword cut off one of his fin-covered legs with her then putting a palm to the back of her sword and stabbing the mermaid up through the side and into its chest cavity before ripping out her sword as the Kelpie tried to brain her with a series of kicks. With the other Kelpie and its rider quickly healing due to the 3 mermaids throwing drops of their stupidly powerful healing blood onto their forms, I knew we needed to kill this one quickly, so I took out my rivers of blood katana and I felt it drink deeply of my life force, and Kagaya danced away at the sight of the sword just as I swung in a quick X-shaped series of slashes that sent beams of corrupted blood into the Kelpie and merman. The X-shaped double slash of cursed blood slammed into the Kelpie and merman, with the merman having his chest cut deeply open and the Kelpie's thick flesh acting as a bit of a barrier for the penetrating effects of the cursed blood attack. But it was enough. The cursed blood of the rivers of blood katana that I made out of the scraps of a cursed, broken weapon Tsubaki had within her workshop clearly went to work as the merman began pissing blood to the point where even as the 3 mermaids hurriedly came to try to heal it,